problem with runners, right? We often don't look for improvement until we need it, and a lot of people don't learn how to run better until they can't run at all, or they're injured. And I mean, I'm guilty of that as well. Runners, they think they need to be pushing, and so they hold a lot of tension, and that tension really isn't ever helpful for a very long period of time, right? There's always a little bit where it's helpful. It's like a stress, right? A little bit can be helpful, but over a long period of time, that unfortunately that's just what people are taught. You got to go harder. You got to go sweat, and or it's not worth it. That's not really a sustainable approach, over the long term, right? Maybe in a race, yes, you're going to go a little bit harder and you're going to push a little bit more, but but yet in running, that's what somehow people think you should do every day. I'm Amelia, and I am now a renegade.
Tonight, we're excited. We got Coach Amelia Vrabel joining us on the Renegade Podcast.
Amelia.
I know Amelia from the Personal Best program. She's a running coach with the Personal Best, and she's got over 25 years of running experiences. What I love about Amelia, and we'll get into this on the episode with her, she's such a positive force in the Personal Best. She's always giving that words of encouragement to the new members, the members that maybe didn't achieve what they hoped to achieve, but there's something special about Amelia. She is one of the most amazing pacers of all time. When she runs her half marathons, she is like a metronome of pacing, and she always likes the negative split. So that means she runs the second half faster than the first half.
Wow, that takes skill. And you know what? I would say one of the things that, for my research, I'm going to be meeting Amelia for the first time here. Whether you're just jogging along or running cheek, there is an athletic brew for me.
Athletic brew, and I went off the deep end tonight. I got a bureau.
You are off-brand, my friend. But is it good?
Well, you know what? I still love athletic, but I wanted to try this Bureau brand. It's Tom Holland, the movie actor. He started a brand, Bureau, and it's really good, actually, to be honest with you. This is a noon wheat. Again, I can't open my can, so
don't be a hero.
That's
Grab a beer up.
Be a hero. Grab a beer.
Oh, yeah, man.
Hey, Tito, I'm having trouble opening my beer.
You need a can opener. Just take off the top and you set like a... Well, cheers.
Welcome to the Renegade Podcast, where we set off each episode to explore that human connection that we all have with running and endurance sport. I'm your co-host, Todd Marentette, and with me,
Uncle Mark.
A big part of the Renegade Podcast is you, our listeners, and we really appreciate the love, the likes, the comments that you share with us on social medias. Is it social medias or media?
All the medias.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on our YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, comment. All that love helps us book great guests. You smirked when I said something in the intro. What were you?
I thought you said. I thought you were gonna do Apple Podcasts, YouTube's, Spotify's. Just adding an S to everything's.
Well, that's the Canadian, right? Or the Southern Ontario.
Yeah, we can go over to the Chryslers.
Hey, you work for Fords? No, I don't. Not at all.
Hey, Renegades. We have something exciting to share with you today, and it's all about revolutionizing the way we think about footwear. Enter Peluva, a brand that's setting new standards in the world of shoes. What makes Peluva unique? It's their commitment to foot health, with a design that mimics the natural movement of your feet. We're talking about shoes that give your toes the freedom to move independently, enhancing your balance and strength with every step. Check out Peluva if you're ready to walk, run, or just stand in a way that your body will thank you for. This isn't just a shoe, it's an upgrade to your daily life. Give your feet the comfort and style they deserve with Peluva. Myself, I've been trail running in the Peluva Strand ATRs. Lightweight, flexible, they really allow your feet to feel the trails. And my feet always feel great after a trail run. We're stoked to have Peluva sponsor our podcast. And as a special offer, you can use the code RUNEGADE for 15% off your order. That's RUNEGADE, and you'll get 15% off your order. Check them out at peluva.com. Your feet Well, thank you.
Amelia, welcome.
Amelia,
Hey, how are you?
thanks for joining us. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I hope my voice isn't too bad. I do need to cough every few minutes, but we'll see.
No problem at all.
No problem. No problem.
Do you want a water or anything? Or I would offer you one right now, but I'm a little far away.
I have a non-alcoholic beer from
cheers.
Athletic. I have a special
one do you
one. I
have?
just tried this one. It's called Spruce Juniper
I
IPA.
haven't had that one yet.
Ooh, Spruce Juniper IPA.
The different ones when I order online, just because I feel like I can get the regular ones in the store. So.
Yeah, I find that I have been rocking the free wave for a while, just
like the
working
Free Wave.
through the case that I have, but I definitely need a variety soon, so we'll switch it up. We'll look for some juniper.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Are you in Canada
I
too,
am.
Mark?
Todd and I actually work together. We live about 45 minutes away from each other, and then work here in Chatham, which is about 45 minutes from Detroit.
We've known each other for about 10 years, right, Mark? And got him into running after listening to all the stories I was talking about. Even though he didn't want to hear the stories, I still told him.
True confession right now, I have been a little bit out of running. I will say winter, we'll say, I don't know, but I need to get back into it. So I feel like after this podcast, I'll be motivated to get, tie the shoes back on tomorrow and get out. Well, actually, we're having a snowstorm right now, so maybe not tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been a little out of it because, when I wake up and it's like -2 and there's ice all over the roads, I'm not super motivated to get out the door and break my leg.
I'm going to get there, though. I feel it. One of these weeks, I've got a treadmill that's a little squeaky, but, it's a start. We'll get on there and go from there. Well, if you recommend that.
Amelia, your running journey,
Yeah.
You've been running for 25 years.
It's been almost 30, actually, because I started running when I was 20 and I'm 50 this year. So... yeah, it's almost 30. So, but yeah.
We won't tell anybody.
Definitely, I definitely feel like that's a big part that people have room to improve no matter really what level they are with running, is just kind of, taking that long approach to staying consistent and just doing the work every day and knowing that it's not going to be a visible improvement every day. But if you add all the little things up, you get there, So my parents are both marathon runners. So full disclosure, they started running when I was pretty young. I kind of only remember them running, but I want to say they started running in the late 60s. And my dad kind of started first. And then I heard the story that he bought my mom a pair of shoes and she ran a race and accidentally won the race because she didn't know she could stop or walk or do anything like that. And so realized something like that. Anyway, realized she also was kind of into this running thing, but I didn't want to run at all when I was a kid. And most of my friends that knew me when I was even in high school are still surprised that I'm a runner or do anything with running, because I was the kid who wouldn't run the mile in high school when I had to, and I just walked and it wasn't for me. But, yeah, I started running and it was one of those things where I was like, well, gosh, I don't know why this is so hard. My mom can run a marathon every month. And she's old. Now I laugh saying that because at the time she was 47. Right. And I'm like, I must just not be doing it right. There must be something I'm just not figuring out. It can't possibly be that I can't do this and my parents can. And yeah, so I just, started, and I remember my first run, I was like, I'm just going to have to, if I slow way down, what happens? And that's kind of what I did. And I just slowed way down. And I remember just that first mile was just unbelievable. Oh my God, I got through a mile, and then you just kind of do it every day and you realize okay, actually it gets easier if your body gets accustomed to it. And you even get to the point where it's fun. And I honestly never thought I would get to that point. If you asked me when I was 10, there was no way. So.
And what was that? What made it fun? Or how did you know that you were starting to have fun? Were you just hey, I'm not tired, I'm not feeling the pain, I'm actually looking forward to that next run, or thinking 2 or 3 runs ahead? Was it a race? You said that you did your first race and you took it at a good pace. Was it a 5K, or did you jump into something even longer than that at that point?
So there's a few questions there, but I think what kind of got me initially kind of keep going is I think once I got it, I found a little bit of a flow, right? And also part of the reason I started running, maybe just to kind of back up too, is I wasn't like completely unathletic. I did a lot of dance and things like that when I was young. So I thought I was relatively fit, but the running was just hard. Although I wouldn't say I was athletic. I'm actually very unathletic, but I thought I was actually pretty fit. But like I say I'm very unathletic because like I don't play any sports that involve like throwing balls or objects or anything like that. But when I got into the running though, because it was so hard when I was in college with classes being at different times, and like I couldn't find an aerobics class that I could go to on a consistent basis because you always had to work around like some other schedule. So the running kind of appealed to me because I was like, well, I could kind of do this anytime if I could figure out how to do it. And then I think once I kind of felt like, okay, it's making a difference. You kind of feel good, right? Once you get that couple miles down, you get in that flow, you get those, that little bit of adrenaline rush and you feel good. And then I think you get a little bit like addicted to that feeling. And I would say that's probably what kept me going initially. I don't remember my first race, at least the first race I remember, there was like a 1.5 mile run in college that was for something. I don't remember what exactly it was. It's like for some benefit or something like that. Like a lot of people, their first race is a marathon. And I'm pretty sure that was my first race. It was like 1.5 miles. And I just kind of wanted to do it. And then I think after that, I had a couple of 5Ks, or it was short. It was short stuff to get started. Because I also went to college like in Indiana in a pretty small town. And so there wasn't a lot of like close runs that I could do. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. I kind of dodged my first race. I still haven't signed up for one yet. And Todd still ribs.
It's true.
Todd ribs me for it, but it was going to be a beer mile. I was going to race Corey Belmore.
Did you?
Yeah.
Once.
Is it a good gate?
Yeah, my parents actually timed me. I don't know too many people who can say their parents timed them in a beer mile.
And they waited for you at the finish line too with another beer in hand?
It was on a track, so they were there for the whole thing. Yeah. And I'm not a very good beer miler because I was actually like a pretty fast runner when I did the beer mile. And it took me 17 minutes to do a beer mile because I am not a fast drinker.
I'm not a chugger. I can't. Yeah. So yeah, next time we'll see. We'll see if I sign up next year for it or whatever.
See, we had an unfair advantage. We had Corey Belmore join us, and he's like the beer mile world record holder. So he's giving us all the tips of like how to like stretch the stomach ahead of time. And so going in, I kind of knew it was going to be painful. We underestimated how hard it was to drink a warm beer. It was like, it was non-alcoholic beers. We had some athletic breweries there, but it was a little bit warm. And every lap, Amelia, like trying to drink a beer, torture. It was tough. It was tough, but it was so much fun. Oh, and you touched on something really interesting, right? It's that evolution. When you start to run, at what point is it becoming an addiction where you need to get your daily run in or your daily movement in? And I think naturally it progresses. It's like a very similar story to you where, the first kilometer I ran, I'm walking, I didn't think I could do it. But it didn't take long to like enjoy it every day. But for me, it was getting a race on a calendar. And my friend talked me into signing up to a race in 3 months out. And knowing that I had to do the work, and I started following the plan and figuring out, I kind of got obsessed with that. It was fun, but it was a goal. From your coaching experience, does one actually need to have a race in the calendar to build a love to running? Or is it better to not have a race in the calendar? What have you seen over your
asking
career?
for a friend?
So, I think it depends on the person. I think there are a lot of people that are very, and myself included, like initially, right? Like they're so outcome driven that the race is the reason that they're out there, right? And they follow the program because of the race. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if that's whatever gets you out there, in my opinion, is whatever gets you out there. It's all great, right? I did have a race eventually, like, because I started running in, let's see, it would have been like December of 96. And then like, I would say I ran my first sort of like real race not until I almost graduated from college, which was actually this race behind me. If you can see on the calendar, it says May of 98. That was my first half marathon. I don't think I ever really had a training program until I ran that race. Now, granted, this was not, this was a long time ago, and the amount of like knowledge and writing training programs and things like that that's out there today was not in existence back then. I mean, I actually often joke that like I taught myself Excel because I put together like a running plan, and that's how I tracked my shoes and things like that. And who knew that would help me, later on in my life too. I mean, I was using it in college, but it was, I got into it because I was kind of using it for my running too. But I think it is really helpful for people to have a race on the calendar in a lot of cases. But I think as you develop kind of more of a love of running, I also say like you could follow a training plan and have no race. If the training helps keeps you going, then there's no requirement to run a race at the end of it. The race could be the prize. It could be you're going to gain knowledge and fitness and everything else from the running, from the training, not from the actual race itself. I mean, some of it is from the race, but if there's a journey ahead of the race, it's amazing what people learn from the actual journey. So I think it depends. I think a lot of people feel like they really need to have a race. Otherwise, they prioritize things ahead of their running. I think for me, I don't think it matters. The race can scare you a little bit. Like,
Could be it.
a lot of people like won't train for a marathon unless they know they've paid the money and they've committed and that's what's going to get them out there. Then sometimes that's a little bit of good to have in your, out there. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have started running. Eventually, you found yourself into coaching. At what point in time did you get yourself into the coaching side of things?
I think when okay, now I'm trying to remember, like, when was things?
It doesn't have to be a
remember what
precise
happened.
date, like December 6th or...
No, it was, when I really, so I had the opportunity to, take some chi running lessons from Danny Dreyer many years ago. Like if you're familiar with the chi running book, Danny wrote that book in like 2002, somewhere around then. It was somewhere around that time. And I had the opportunity to meet Danny when I lived in the Bay Area, where he lived at the time when he was writing the book. And I remember learning a lot just from things of like technique ways that I had never really thought of to make my running more efficient. But I was still like at that time, young and really much more focused just on running fast than I was in like developing myself for the long term. So there were some things that stuck. Like I knew in my head there was a lot of good stuff there, but I can't say back then I really practiced it enough to develop my technique in the body. Like you can know things in your head, but then they don't happen until you practice them, right? So the reason I say that is because about like 10 years after that, I had an injury that was pretty bad. And I pulled a hamstring. And that was when I said, okay, I'd gone through probably like 10 years, maybe more, I don't remember, I was kind of at the point where like I could run maybe a few months at a time without getting an injury. But if I could last 6 months or 8 months, that was like a really long time for me to not get some kind of injury. And so, it took one that really knocked me out to kind of go, okay, all those things you learned like 10 years ago, maybe you should just work on them. And I did that. And that's when I, really got very deep into learning running form and technique. And it just transformed my running. And so I really thought, well, other people were asking me about it. And I thought, okay, well, maybe there's an opportunity for me to help other people with this. And that's kind of how I got into, teaching running technique and such. And I don't do that as much anymore, but like through that process, I learned how to really write training plans and how to really work with runners at different levels. And some of this is stuff you kind of learn over time, but you don't understand the why behind it. And now I feel like it's just something I'd love to help people, see what they can do. Because, again, I was that person who like, oh, there's no way I can even run the mile. And then, it was probably like, I don't know, less than 10 years later, I ran the Boston Marathon. I mean, like, how did you get from, so I always say, like, anybody can do it. It's just a matter of having the right discipline and plan. And, you know, I don't like the word motivation because I think motivation is really overrated and I don't think it's necessary. It's really discipline and consistency. And for a lot of people, getting the right feedback to know when they're going off course. And I had my mom, my mom ran my first marathon with me. So I didn't have the opportunity to go off course. She kept me on course. I guarantee you I would have made a billion mistakes in that race that I didn't make because she was like right here. And if I try to go too fast, she was like, hold me back. So that's where I feel like I can help people is I know what it feels like to go off course. And, sometimes you don't realize you're going off course early, but the earlier you figure it out and you can kind of get yourself back, the more you can kind of get back on the direction that you're headed. So I love seeing people, do things they never thought they could do, or just even find little things that help them. I know, Todd in the PB program, there's always people that are, I don't know if I should do this or should do this. And, sometimes they come back and they're like, oh, that thing you told me just really helped. And it's like, well, I love hearing that, because it just, somebody had a really great day and they did all the work. But sometimes, again, you can just sort of help course correct them in a certain way that they get a way better result.
You're so true there. And that's what I love about the Personal Best program is the frankness, the sharing of the coaches and Flores and Coach Scott, that they've experienced everything that you might be experiencing that you're worried about. Some of it good, lots of it bad. They're willing to share it with you. And the best coaches in the world are the ones that made all the mistakes. And so that's what I love about when I talk to Flores and whatnot. Like, he's made every mistake in the world and he tells you about it. And you're like, I'm not alone. It's actually me. It's not just me. That's important to know. And I see the evolution too. Like, it is fun when you get to that point where as a runner, you get so high and then something happens. You had your hamstring injury. People have foot injuries. And then there's two modes. They either quit running because they get hurt, or they go on this self journey of learning running form. And then you have something all else to practice and learn from. But where was the light switch or the inflection point, Amelia, where you went from being like a super fast runner, like you said, you were maybe type A, run my races, to the long view approach? What was the inflection point, and what made you change this to have this longer term view, or did you always have it?
No, I will always refer to myself as a recovering type A personality. I am a type A. I was a type A. I have still very type A tendencies, but I kind of check myself now a lot more than I used to. And I would say it was really when I learned that I had to practice running, not just run. And I think a lot of people don't think of their running as a practice. They just go, I gotta do 4 miles today. I gotta do 6 miles today. It's like, no, there's a reason you're out there doing those 4 miles or 6 miles. And first of all, you don't have to do anything. It's your body. It's going to be different day to day. Yes, you have a plan. And obviously we want to stay to the plan as best we can, but what are you gaining from spending the hour out there? Are you working on something? Are you developing your aerobic conditioning? Are you working on technique? If you're just going out there and pounding out a bunch of miles, there's some effect, of course, right? But you're really not getting the full potential out of it like you would if people who have an actual practice, right? We call things like a yoga practice. You don't go to yoga class and go, I'm going to crush it today. You go there and you're like, okay, I'm going to accept that my body is what it is and I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to learn, I'm going to get something out of this class, whatever it is. So I think I started looking at my running that way. And also, I also have to be realistic with myself as to what amount of time and energy I'm going to put into the running and what I can expect to get out of it. And, you juggle different things at different parts of your life. And for me right now, it's just not a focus to go run fast marathons. I don't think I'm doing the time that I need to do that to do what I want to do. but I just love to get out there and run. And I still follow programs, more shorter races, but I always err on the taking the long-term approach, because the short-term approach has, kicked me in the butt so many times. There's been so many days where I was like, oh, I felt good and I did something, and then I was out for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or longer, and I think you do that enough times and you do get a little bit better at checking yourself. And there's also just a lot more good knowledge out there. I mean, I don't know how, I don't even remember how I stumbled on low heart rate training. But gosh, there was so much to learn there. And I just think, gosh, why did I discover this when I was 40? I wish I would have discovered this when I was, 25 or 30, and I mean, I have to say that if I had probably discovered that years ago, there's no way I would have been getting hurt as often as I was back in the day. Just because I think my body wouldn't have let me go do those dumb things that I did. But, it also involves looking at running as more than just the hour you spend out there. It's the other things we talk about in the program that people overlook, like their sleep and their nutrition and the stress they have in their life and everything else that they're doing. And, Coach Ben, when he was helping out in the program, would always say, like, it's not how much you train, it's how much you can absorb. And so I often think about things like that. Like when I was in Barcelona last week for work, I had a really busy schedule. I was, on a crowded show floor and 8 hours jet lag. And I said to myself, okay, like if I wake up before, like I set my alarm for 7:00 in the morning because I needed to be ready to go at like 8:00, which obviously doesn't leave time enough for a run. But I kind of told myself, like, if you sleep all the way to 7:00, your body needed that sleep. So that's the priority. And if for whatever reason you wake up at 6, then go for the run. But if you don't wake that up on your own, and that's not something you do long term, because I think people will go, well, I'd never run if I had that approach. Well, of course, that's not a long-term strategy. But when you're somewhere for a week and the focus is on dealing with the circumstances you're dealing with for that week, you do have to balance, like, what's the most important thing. And if I had sacrificed 2 hours of sleep or an hour of sleep every day just to get a run in, I don't, I caught a cold at the end of the trip. It might have got worse. It might have been worse. I was actually pretty fortunate that I got out without too much trouble. So, yeah.
Hey, Renegades. A big part of the Renegade Podcast is sharing with you, our listeners, the stuff that works for us. And we have an excellent friend of the podcast, Path Projects. Founded in 2018, they're focused on functional designs, innovative materials, and apparel that looks great in the city and gear that excels on the most grueling of trails. They offer a complete range of technical gear and apparel for today's modern athlete. For our listeners, use the code TRP10 for 10% off your order for a limited time. Check them out at pathprojects.com.
I just wanted to circle back on a couple things you said there. The first being crushing yoga. You obviously haven't seen Todd on a yoga mat before.
It crushes me that yoga is impossible. I'm not good at yoga by any means.
And the second thing was you mentioned Danny Dry earlier and the chi running method. For the noobs, so I'm representing the noob side of things here, new runners out there. Can you expand a little bit more on what some of the fundamentals are of chi running?
Yeah, so I mean, chi running is really like a combination of Tai Chi and running. So you don't need to know Tai Chi, but like you do need to kind of to understand. It's all about, energy efficiency and, taking some of that fundamentals of martial arts and applying them to running. So, a lot of what we learn is like, how do you use, what we teach is how do you let gravity help pull you forward? So you're not doing as much work and that keeps you more efficient, right? Because you want to do as little as possible to get you to where you need to go. Because any sort of extra movement that's not helping your running is just tiring you out, or it's just creating other inefficiencies, which are ultimately going to just lead to injury, right? And I think that's an approach that doesn't just apply to running, right? I mean, that's like you want to create a great podcast, right? You're not out there like doing all these extra things that aren't really helping what you're doing. You're focusing on what you're doing and you're putting your effort. And like, there's so many things in life that kind of mentality applies to. But I do see a lot of people, running. And if you don't think about, it does take a little bit of thought at first, to like think about like, what am I doing with my hands or my head? And, how are my legs moving? And a lot of people don't think about that because they never learned how to think about that. Which is actually funny because, and by the way, if I talk too much, like cut me off.
No, never.
I
Please,
sometimes do.
This is why you're here.
Okay. But the best coaches of runners are like 4-year-old kids. If you look at a very young child out there running, it's effortless. That is exactly what people should look to run. But what happens is, it's effortless when you're 4, even a little bit older, right? Because you're out there having fun, you're chasing your friends, you're running after something. You're not sitting behind a computer all day at work. You're not stressed out, you're not like hunched over half the day. You just naturally move well. And then sometime in your adult life, that changes. And then you go out and you try to run and you have all these things in your head like, oh, I have to run this fast, or I have to be able to do this, or it's supposed to be hard. Little kids don't think about all that stuff. And so because of that, they're having fun. And I think a lot of adults, they compare themselves in funny ways with what they think they should be doing. And a lot of adult runners, I don't have this problem because like I said, I did not run when I was young, but a lot of adult runners go, well, I ran a 5-minute mile when I was in high school. Well, you're not in high school anymore. Life was different back then. You can't compare yourself with that. That's silly, like, so,
So true.
A lot of it's, getting out of your own head and just being, thinking about being aligned and efficient and just using your body as well as you can. And except like running is not about just using your legs. It's your whole body moving down the road. What you do with your arms affects your legs. It affects how you move. And kind of, I like to be able to help people sort of, find those little things. I always tell people like, when I would teach workshops, I'm like, you're not going to leave here and become a different runner. I can't do that in 3 hours. There's no way. But what I can do is give you like a little tool belt, right? So when you're running and you feel this, oh, wait, okay, maybe I need to, is my head on straight? Is my arm dropped too far down? And like, I can give you like 3 or 4 tools that you can go, okay, let me see if I can correct those things. And it's always those little things that, oh my goodness, it just got a lot easier, right? Or that's where I really tried to help people. And what helped me a lot is and there's things I still work on, and things that I also take cues from other runners when I see them. I mean, I'm never going to go tell somebody like, oh gosh, you look like you're struggling, but I do see people running down the road and their heads are hunched forward, and I just think, where's your head? What are you doing? Like, it's good to sort of check in with yourself, just to make sure that you're not because we get all pulled into bad habits and different things like that. But
it's funny, right? I laugh because running is a lot like a fingerprint. It's very unique just to you. And in the small town or the town that you live in, when you're running around, you see other runners, you can usually spot them and know who they are way before you can recognize their face because they're running for them. And then you're like, you might want to help them, but you don't want to say anything because maybe they're not hurt but yeah, you see some weird stuff going on. And
yeah, I just use it for myself. I see people and I go, oh, better check in. Because I mean, there's things I need to work on. I have a tendency for whatever reason to let my arm hang down. I don't know why. I just do. It only really happens on one arm. I used to just think they took bad pictures of me at races. No, it's not that. It was me. So I think in my depth perception, my arms are like way up here when they're actually like where they should be. I spent so long having them down that I don't realize that, I feel like when they're like, oh my God, I'm going to hit myself in the face. But no, that's probably usually my arms are in the right place when I'm doing that. So.
Well, take a photo, see a photo of yourself or take a video of yourself. And it's eye-opening if you can actually sit honestly with yourself and say, oh my God, do I actually do that? I'm with you, Amelia. Like, I take videos every now and then for the podcast or something. And I always look and my one arm just seems to be not doing what the other one is. But I swear when I'm running, it feels like it is, but it's just a constant like reminder. Okay, well, just double check. Are you elbows back, elbows back? And like, that's the kind of key elements that I remember from chi running. I read the book, I watched Danny's video and whatnot. And there's the things that I always remember was, run tall, lean forward, and the gears. And that was really interesting because when I was running, I always thought you ran harder or to run faster. You run harder. And it wasn't. You have to like relax and have the legs go up behind you. And it was really eye-opening to me that I wish I would have found chi running when I wasn't injured, because it helped me get through my injury, but it took so long to get through my injury that I maybe lost some of the excitement of it. It's like, if I would have found it before I was injured, I would never have gotten injured. You said that earlier, like,
Well,
if you found it.
and that's the problem with runners, right? We often don't look for improvement until we need it. And a lot of people like don't learn how to run better until they can't run at all, or they're injured. And I mean, I'm guilty of that as well, it got me back into it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we get in our own way in running and in plenty of life. This could be a life lesson, but when we hold tension while we're running, we're getting in our way. We would actually be better if we just relaxed it. And it's like we in life often put up our own roadblocks to success. That's like, just let it go. It just clears the way. But runners, yeah, they think they need to be pushing. And so they hold a lot of tension, and that tension really isn't ever helpful for a very long period of time, right? There's always a little bit where it's helpful. It's like a stress, right? A little bit can be helpful, but over a long period of time, but this, unfortunately, that's just what people are taught. You got to go harder. You got to go sweat, and or it's not worth it. And it's like, well, that's not really a sustainable approach, like over the long term, right? Maybe in a race, yes, you're going to go a little bit harder and you're going to push a little bit more. But, I often kind of joke with people like in other sports. If you're into basketball, let's say, professional basketball players don't go play a game every time they get out there. They do drills, they work on technique, they work on working with each other as a team. They do a lot of things. Like, they don't just go out and like go for however many minutes hard every single time. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody would ever think you would do that. But yet in running, that's what somehow people think you should do every day.
Interesting. That's all we do. We'll just practice running. Don't practice the running form. And that's what I liked when Florence introduced us to Dr. Lawrence Van Lingen, right? When he brought in like the flow rope and the walking backwards and the tire walking and the awesomizer. Like, these 4 little things that I'm trying to do more often. And deep down inside, it's like, can this flow rope actually do what it's supposed to be doing? And your running becomes easier. So I would never have thought of practicing that. But by 5 minutes of practicing that before a run, my 45-minute run feels so much easier nowadays. It's just all connected.
I look at it, it's like another one of those things in your bag of tricks, right? Like, it's another thing you can check in with yourself. And I think some of these things to practice, you're training. You're not just training your muscles, right? When you're practicing the flow rope, you're training your body, but you're also training your mind. You're training everything together. And it just emphasizes so much that it's not just about how strong your muscles are. It's about how you're all connected, and how your posture is, and how you're moving, and being able to flow in those movement patterns. Like, somebody who's stronger than you may not be able to be as fast because they can't move as efficiently. So it's not about brute strength in running. It never has been, and it never will be. And I think the more we can find some of these little things, like, I love the flow rope. I remember starting practicing it though, and I could not figure it out at all.
It was impossible.
I had to just do it like a lasso for a few minutes just to kind of get myself moving it in the right direction. But then over time, it's like one day it clicks, and it's like, okay, now it would just feel so weird to do it the other way. But yeah, that's a helpful one. I try to do those things, regularly in my running. I haven't really done any of the tire pull stuff because I don't actually have a tire. But
we can get you one.
We'll
send one in the mail.
Yeah. Okay. And the backwards walking, I do avoid doing that in the winter though, because I don't want to walk into a pile of ice, and that could be really dangerous.
So I have a question. Going back to coaching, if you had to coach one type of person, so beginner, injured, or elite for the rest of your career, what type of person would it be and why?
That's a good question.
Beginners,
Yeah.
they're the easiest. Yeah, I mean, they haven't learned all the bad habits. It's and not that, and this, I will say, like, it's a choice to be a beginner or not, right? It's a choice to have a beginner's mindset in whatever you do. And I've found that the most successful people I've run into are the ones who adopt that mindset, even when they're not the beginner, because they always sort of approach things from, I have something to learn. But yeah, it's definitely harder to coach somebody who has a lot of like bad habits or like fixed way of thinking. Not that, again, if they're injured, they couldn't, usually if they're injured, they're like desperate at some level to not be injured, and which is why they're there. But I love coaching beginners because I think often they just don't know what they can do, and they are open to learning. And I think it's so important to celebrate all your small wins. And I think a lot of people that are a little more advanced, they don't see those things as wins, like somebody who was an athlete in high school or played, basketball or football or whatever it's running, might not think like running for 3 minutes at a time is a win. But somebody who's never been athletic in their whole life, that is a big win. And, but the person who doesn't see it as a win doesn't keep doing it. They often don't have the discipline to continue it because they don't kind of build that momentum, where the beginner goes, oh my gosh, like I've got to 3 minutes, like that's a long time. And then they're out there trying to do better the next time. And so that's, yeah. And again, there's people at all levels and they all can be coached. But it's a matter of how coachable you want to be. And that's a choice.
And you mentioned bad habits. Have you ever coached somebody with a bad habit that was actually doing something that you're like, this shouldn't be happening? Like this is actually improving your...
Well, she helps coaches me, Mark. So
it's like, stop doing that, but I see the results.
I'm going to cover my ears, maybe.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean.
Me neither.
Like,
I'm just trying to go the other way, where it's like, is it
What's the worst bad habit that you come across,
Yeah, there you
Amelia?
go.
That you see someone's coming to you, you're like, oh my Lord, this is going to be a tough habit to break. It could be their mindset,
like
or it could be
they're
that
smoking while they're
they
running,
gotta
or
really-
I think not being honest with themselves as to how they're doing. There's no one running form issue that's like the worst, right? Because everybody's body is a little different, and people can get away with different things. It's just like, you can have your car out of alignment and still drive it across the country. I mean, it might not be in great shape when it gets there, but and then there's some cars that'll completely break down in 10 miles if they're not tuned just right. But I really think that, again, the worst is just not approaching it with that beginner's mindset. And often that comes from, either, well, I mean, if you don't have beginner's mindset, it's because you think there's nothing to learn at some level, right? If it's kind of the opposite. The beginner's mindset is realizing there's always something to learn. And so you're open to learning, and you're really, some people are actually just actively looking for things that could help them learn. And I love working with those people, because they're going to notice things that I might not notice, that is happening in their lives. But people who are either like not very open to learning or just focused on the one thing, they're like, sometimes, you see people in the program who are just so focused on their math time, and their math time's not going down. Okay. Well, that's like one thing, right? Like, but what else is going on? Because there's always more to the picture than that. And you know what? Also, maybe your math time isn't going to go down. At the end of the day, like, is your goal to have the fastest math time ever? No. The goal is to, usually get to a race. That's why we're here. So, like, but you don't want to be like too hyper focused on one thing at the detriment of everything else. And so, yeah, I think just that's the hardest. And it's hard because, you don't know what people have been told or conditioned to think, or they don't realize, like, they're not, oftentimes, Todd knows this, in the group, when people have to come and slow down to run under math, they're like, well, this can't be right. I'm not going hard enough. I'm not even feeling like I'm getting a workout. Like, I this is too easy. And it's like, maybe, but that's kind of how it works, and it's just, this is often people who are 40, 50 years old, their whole life, they thought this had to be hard. Well, in one day you can't, it's hard to tell somebody in one day, like, oh, well, nope, that's not how it needs to be. And it's going to feel painfully slow right now, but trust me, it'll build over the long term. And, it does, if they're, again, honest with themselves and not just focused on the running, but also open that up to go, okay, what else is going on in my life? What else might be affecting how this is happening and things like that.
As you were saying that, Amelia, I thought podcasts do a really good job of bringing on the success stories of everything, every training philosophy and whatnot. And the MAF journey, you touched on a couple words: patience, honesty. I've seen this. I was this. You start this low heart rate training and you're like, hey, I can do this. But then every run has to get a little bit faster at that heart rate. And you're pushing the envelope every single time because you hope that it's a 3-month training plan. Well, for me, I started my MAF journey in 2019. And I did get faster a little bit every year. And I set lots of personal bests. But I honestly, running didn't become easy till last year. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. It took 5 years for me as a runner to feel that I'm running effortlessly or easier effort at the same heart rate. So it's not overnight. It's like a long-term thing. And that's what I wish for folks who come on the personal best or anybody who explores that heart rate training is that they're honest with themselves. You touch on it, to be honest with yourselves. It's not going to happen overnight. There's always that one person that they'll do MAF for 3 weeks and they'll go run a sub 3-hour marathon. But they were super fast to begin with. Like there was something else there. And the MAF just helped them slow down and recover for a little bit. But for our mere mortals, it does take a long time. And be patient, enjoy the process like you touched on at the start.
Yeah, it's hard, because again, I think running does attract a lot of A-type personalities, and they can be the hardest because they're often so like, go, go, go. I got to get faster every time. If I'm not getting faster every time, something's not working. And it's like, well, that's not how anything else works. Like it's like, as silly as it sounds, it's like asking, like, how fast is that tree in my front yard going to grow? Mm. I don't know. It depends on how much water, how much sunlight. There's things you can do, but at the end of the day, just some things take more time because, and it's kind of like a tree, like there's roots that you don't see it, that systems that need to be established, but you can't see that because they're underground. They're the roots. And a lot of people haven't built those systems. And so it's going to take longer for that tree to even start doing anything. Where some people, like you said, they're already fast. Maybe they already have some of the roots. They need just a little bit of tweaking and they're going to see results faster. But again, we just can't compare ourselves to other people because you can't see what's underground. We all have very different lives, and what somebody can do in one life is very different than what the same exact person with the same exact genetics could do in a different lifestyle. And then we don't have all the same exact genetics. So it's like there's multiple variables here that you're dealing with. But I always tell people, like, you got to stick with it, and find joy in it. And if that means, break free from MAF and do your own thing once a week do it. It might slow down your progress, but who cares? You're still running. You're over the long haul, you're running. So it's better than not.
Well, maybe this is a great kind of intro into this most important question. When you came across the Personal Best program, what drew you to the PB program? And what are the key elements of the Personal Best program for those listening, new to running and never hearing the Personal Best? Like, what are the key elements that make it a different, more longer term training program or lifestyle program than others out there?
Well, for me, I had already started to investigate, go down the rabbit hole of low heart rate training. And many years ago, I had gotten a heart rate monitor that I remember like putting on once. And I think I was half a block out the door and my heart rate was already at like 170. And I thought, oh God, I don't even know how I can run any slower. Like, that's just not possible. And I put it away. I didn't use it. And, that was a long time ago. And then of course I came back to it, But I was intrigued by it because I knew that I was running at a particularly high heart rate, and, what would happen if I slowed down. And, as it turns out, like, I've continued to be able to run stronger, running slower. And I often have people tell me, like, I don't understand how you can race so much faster than you train. And I'm like, well, that's why I can race so much faster, because I train so slow. It's not I'm racing faster in spite of how I'm training. It's like I'm racing faster because of the way I train. If I trained harder, I would be tired and I would not be able to race, faster. But I think there's a couple things in the program that I think are really beneficial. I mean, it's just looking at running outside of the lens of what you do for that hour every day, right? And this understanding that is just missing in so many training programs. Yeah, some of them will be like, okay, there's running and strength training, or there's running and diet or nutrition, right? But that's kind of where I see most of them end. There's no component of like your overall stress in your life and things like sleep, and fundamentally, like, it's not a nutrition program. It's understanding, are you fueling properly? And it's also just all the different components that influence your life and how they play into your running. And I think Flores has just done an amazing job creating the content in the videos, but really, 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 it's become the community more than anything. There's just such a supportive community of people that are at all different stages in the program. And there's so much expertise, and people that are willing to share, that I just think that is like the beauty of the whole program. I mean, you could take the training schedules and do them, but you're not getting out of the program the same thing as if you really are participating and learning. And that's why I always encourage people, like, really, I know it's hard, but like, join some calls. You don't have to join every single call every week, but it's such a good way to check in and, just get some really good feedback on, what maybe that, kind of back to what I talked about earlier, like, you might just be veering a little off track, and there could just be things on there that could just help you kind of make the most of the time you're spending out there. Because ultimately, that's all you have, is the time you can spend. But, if you're making your time 95% efficient versus 55% efficient, you're going to get a lot more out of that time that you have. And I think you can see that in the results of people that have really, like, you get in what you get out what you put in a lot of ways. And there's just been so many great stories of people that have, gotten so much out of the program, and, did things that they didn't think they could do. And it's so cool. And they're continuing to do that, and I love it. So.
And you're right. Is that the community is fantastic. And almost every week you see someone post, here's a great race that I went and did. Or if they didn't have a great race, they're honest with themselves. But what I've seen is there are some amazing performances. People are doing big things with the Personal Best program. And it's just so inspiring. It's like, I saw so-and-so do that, and I'm kind of doing the same thing, and they're focusing on sleep and I'm focusing on sleep. Maybe it's going to work for me. And I like the idea of the sharing. That's my biggest thing I like, is just the community too.
For me, like, because I've been in it the whole time, I've seen people, I mean, when did it start? Like 2019 or 2020, I think. I can't remember. There was another name, and then it kind of morphed into the PB program. But like, I've seen people over years. And I think sometimes, this is what I always try to explain to some of the new people that join, is, okay, you might not be seeing all this progress yourself, because as we all know, when we start with low heart rate training, you don't always see the progress right away. So you jump into this program and you see these people that are like, oh, I did this, these great things happen. And you're going, okay, when am I going to see some of this? But I always try to help them understand, like, you didn't see that person 3 years ago. That person has been doing this for 3 years. Not that it's necessarily going to take 3 years, but like, when you see the evolution of some of these people, it's even more amazing to see how much people are improving over the years. So like, you can get inspired by the people who are doing all these things, because we all start somewhere. And that is probably the number one lesson I have always told people when I'm running is you have to start where you're at. You cannot start where somebody else is at. Like, I can't start where you're at, Todd. Sorry. Like, you're somewhere, I'm somewhere else. Like, if I try to start where you're at, I'm just going to fall backwards, because that's not what I'm ready for. And so many people that, only know running, like, because they run with a group of friends or have something in their head. And not that there's anything wrong with running with a group of friends, but you can't start where your friend is at if they're at a different place than you. You gotta start where you're at. And, you can get anywhere you need to go, but like, it's like giving somebody a map and not knowing where they are. How are they ever going to get to a destination? They're not, because they're not starting in the right place. So you've got to understand kind of like, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's what I need to do. And like, when I look back when I was 20, and where I was at was like, I could barely run a mile, and it was really slow and it was hard. But if I had gone and said, I need to run 4 miles today, I would have quit after a day, because I would have been so depressed by how hard it was that I would have never gone out the next day, So, yeah.
So total hypothetical situation, but what kind of advice would you give somebody who, let's just say, he's 40-ish and has been a little bit out of running for a while and wants to ease back into it? And, is there something that he should contemplate even before lacing up those shoes for the first time in, let's say, 5 or 6, 3 to 4 months? Is there hydration, nutrition, sleep? Things like that. And just take us to a point before you have to start billing us for the advice.
It's all good. I think there was a shoe company that like said, just do it. I mean, like, get started. Like, so many people think about what they're going to do and what they're going to get started, what they're going to plan. Like, okay, at some point you just got to start, right? Now, if you haven't been running, I often sort of tell people, like, you got to start with less than you think. Again, you just got to build the habit, because it's a lot easier to grow a habit if you have a habit. If you don't have a habit, it's very, very hard to grow a habit. And so for a lot of people, that's literally 5 or 10 minutes. Like, I don't know what this hypothetical person's life is like, but most people have 10 minutes. Like, they could spend 10 minutes, like, scrolling through YouTube or whatever. I have a lot of people, it's hard to make an argument that you don't have 10 minutes, like, in some way, shape, or form, right? So if you have 10 minutes, I would literally focus on building a 10-minute habit for a week or two. And don't even think past the 10 minutes. Like, just do the 10 minutes, whatever. And then once you got that habit down, then you can like assess, okay, how am I feeling? Like, where do I build? How do I, not that you're going to do 10 minutes a day forever, but it's that idea of just getting that in your system and going. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people have problems with New Year's resolutions, right? They go and they're going to go to the gym every day. Well, they're not really saying they're going to go to the gym every day. They're trying to get themselves to go to the gym for like an hour every day. And they didn't ever figure out how to carve out that hour, or how they were going to feel after that hour. Or if you're just going to rely on motivation, that is fleeting. So that's not a good thing to rely on. But if they all they did was say, I'm going to go open the door of the gym every day and spend, 5 minutes in there and leave, they would probably be able to more easily continue that resolution. So again, it's back to like developing the consistency and the discipline. And then when that first week that you did those 10 minutes every day, like, that's a big win. Check a box, high five, like you got to really be proud of your accomplishments, because all those 10 minutes add up, they really add up.
Well, that's great advice for anybody who's experiencing that right now, if you happen to be listening to this podcast. So
yeah, I don't know who that could be, Mark. I don't know.
There's somebody out there, I'm sure. Maybe Tito.
So I think just you can really, we've all seen that equation. Like, you just do like 1% better every day, like, it grows exponentially, and it's so true. With any, but it also works the other way. Like, if you just start to do less and less and less every day, you can, devolve back into a different, and a lot of people I think find too is like, if if you can couple something with that habit, it also can help. Like if you can, make sure you've got your clothes ready to go or whatever it is, or like a reward, or if if it's really cold and you're going to be on a treadmill, like maybe you have a great show you're watching on while you're doing that, and you can kind of couple those things together. Again, it's if that works to get that habit in your system, and then, that becomes your default way of thinking and your default way of operating. And it's like if you've read the book Atomic Habits, I'll say this quote wrong, but like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. If you don't build those systems, then how are you going to achieve your goals? You might by just blind luck, but you're not going to be able to keep it up. You've got to have the systems.
That is unbelievable advice for all runners, anybody who's looking to get into running, because where the foundation is, if you're new to running, like Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're probably in your mind right now thinking, I got to get out and do my daily 5K that you used to like to do, right?
That is right.
Because you're newer into running. I like to do my daily 10K that I'm doing. But when you're new, 10 minutes is going to be everything, because you got to build the habit, like Amelia is saying. And then over time, 10 minutes becomes 15 and 20. And then next thing you know, you're running 45 minutes a day, but it takes time. And if you never develop the love, the habit, and that, you touch on it at the very start about it, it's the consistency, enjoy the work, the long-term view. If you focus on that, you're going to be a much healthier long-term runner than I'm going to go and qualify for Boston next week. You might, but then you might never run again after that. Like, it's just, there's a shift in thinking that, like that what you shared there, Amelia.
And I think for me, like, I am really, I look back and I'm really grateful that I found running as early as I did, because although I did a lot of things wrong, I didn't have the greatest technique. I do find that building that habit has helped me in so many things that are not running, like just outside of running, and just the ability to have that discipline and, be grateful for the wins that you have, keep you going in so many different areas of life, that I don't struggle with that anymore. I struggle with the weather sometimes, and I go, oh gosh, it's horrible outside. But I also know that because I really love the discipline, like, it's not hard for me to get back into it if I take some time off. And I do recognize that sometimes that is hard for people, that they can get out, because you can get out of a habit just as easily as you can, build one. They do go away eventually, if you're not consistent with it. But I think through that, you develop the love of it that kind of in and of itself keeps you going, which is, I'm so grateful that I found that, because like I said, I never thought I would ever find that running, because I just, I thought it didn't like me, and I couldn't do it when I was young. And it was funny because, the first few years I was running, but it took me years before I could catch up with my mom, and she's almost 30 years older than me. And, that's a little bit like of a tough thing for an ego for a 20-something-year-old person. But, I just really started to love it. And now I just I'm grateful that I have something that I love, when, at this time in my life, a lot of people are coming to grasp with their health, and they're going, oh my gosh, I've got to start something. I don't have to start something. And I'm so glad I started it so long ago. But I recognize it's not easy. It's not easy for people. And it's easier when you're younger, and it's harder when you're older, because you've had more years of not doing it. At this point in my life, I've been running far longer than I've been not running. In fact, I've been running marathons longer than I haven't run a marathon in a while, but like, I've had more of my life where I've been running marathons and such than before that. So, it's definitely, it gets more built into you at that point.
That's fantastic. I know we're approaching here an hour.
Yeah.
Amelia, where can folks find you on socials? Like, where can they find Coach Amelia?
So I have a Facebook page called Focus Footsteps, which I think kind of embodies really how I approach running and just a lot of things in life. But I probably haven't been as active there as lately, although that is where you can find me. And I do also use the Instagram, which has the same name. I'm probably a little more active on Instagram, and then it pushes to Facebook. But yeah, and then I'm also active in the PB program as one of the coaches. So I spend a lot of time in there, and there's a huge community now, which is great. But it's just so much fun to be able to help people, just accomplish things they didn't know they could accomplish.
That's wonderful. And we can't thank you enough, Amelia, for joining us. You touched on so many cool elements here. We'll pull together some show notes and some threads on this, but you talked about running as a practice running, the beginner's mindset. Maybe one last question I had for you is, what's one thing that you're interested in learning recently? Running or maybe non-running related for that beginner's mindset you talked about?
I have recognized pretty strongly in the last year that I have not been as dedicated to strength training as I probably should be as a woman in my late 40s. So I am really trying to learn more about how to improve my strength. And I realize I'm starting this later. If I could give advice to people, I would say don't wait till you're like in your late 40s. Fortunately, I'm not coming across this because something happened and I needed to. But, I'm really trying to learn a lot about just, how I can improve my longevity and as I get older, because I recognize that at this stage in my life is probably more important than my running. I don't love strength training as much as I love running, but I am finding some things that I do enjoy, classes and such that I like to take, which I'm really grateful for, because again, it's all about like being able to keep it up and stay consistent. But yeah, that's something I'm really just trying to learn more about is strength training and the different things that I can do to benefit me, not to be a better runner per se, although it does, I think, help your running. But it's more I look at it more from the perspective of I want to live just like, I don't want to exist. I mean, I want to exist, but I don't want to just exist, when I'm 70 or 80 years old. I don't want to struggle to do things in life because I lack the strength to do them. And I do think a lot of runners get so hyper-focused on running, or they only do strength training for the efforts of bettering their running. But really, I've been learning a lot about how important it is just for, bone density and overall strength and mobility and just keeping yourself in the best possible health. So that is definitely something that kind of woke me up, if you will, a bit, I would say last fall. And I've just put a lot more focus on that than I have had to tell myself, though, like, there's going to be days I'm not going to run as much because I have to prioritize this. And that can be hard because you don't get to check off the miles that you think you should be doing. But it's also very beneficial. It's kind of like sleeping. It's very beneficial. Like you could skip it, but to run more, you could skip your strength training to run more, but is it really going to help you as a human as much?
That's excellent advice, and something I think we can all take. So I really, really appreciate your time this evening and for joining us. It was great to meet you, and for the advice as well. For anybody that's looking to get back into running, this has just been absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, if you're looking to get into running, just get into it. And I will say one last thing, like, that doesn't mean running for everybody. In fact, for a lot of people, it doesn't mean running. And I say that in the nicest possible way, but the best way for a lot of people to get into running is walking. And that is, going back to the start where you're at, that is where many people really would benefit the most from starting. Not to say they could never get into running, but it's just, often I see people starting to get into running when in reality, what they could benefit from would be going back to like building those tree roots. Like if they were walking, they would really build much deeper roots so that when they start running, they have a lot more to build from versus saying, okay, everybody's running, I got to go do that too. Because that can often set you up for failure long term.
Yeah, definitely. Focusing on those stabilizer muscles and just getting out there and doing things again.
But yeah, get out there. That is the bigger thing, is get that vitamin D. Get going.
Thank you so much.
You heard it from Coach Amelia. Get out there.
Get out. Get out. Get out there.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Podcast, and we'd love to hear from you. Send us a note. RunegadePodcast@gmail.com. That's RUNEGADE podcast@gmail.com. We'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. You can check out our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And remember, in a world of runners, be a renegade.